I'm not gonna waste your time, so there won't be any intro. In this tutorial, I'll be teaching you guys how to make your own voiceover system using all of the NPCs you have and by also utilizing a few other components. So let's go over those. In this tutorial, there will be 4 major segments that we'll be discussing. First is the initial setup, that being the struct and the data table. The second being gathering the references from all of the NPCs and the player itself. The third and the most important one is the setting up of game instance and its own interface. And then lastly, we'll just test it out. So let's talk about the main theory. What happens is we have a game instance that is running constantly. Okay, game instance is probably one of the most important blueprints we have here. And game instance is constantly checking out on things and you can interact with it by using an interface, a simple blueprint interface. So in essence, what happens is all of the NPCs are sending out their own references to the game instance. The game instance knows which NPC is where and what reference it is. And we ask the game instance to basically play all of the voice, basically the dialogues, play all of the voice animations, the face animations, the subtitles and other stuff. Okay, so this is the gist of it. Now let's see this in action. So first of all, we'll need a struct. I've named it this one as s_underscore voiceover data, conveniently named. You can simply just right click, go to blueprint and make a struct. Okay, and if we open this struct, we'll see these things. These are all of the variables. So if you are aware what a struct is, then that's brilliant. If you're not, then you should check out the documentation. But struct is just a collection of other variables. Okay, now we have 4 main important data aspects here in this struct. Okay, they're related to the data directly. First one being the text, the subtitle text. Okay, second one being the dialogue audio, which is technically the subtitle text but the audio form of it. And then we have the facial mocap, which is an optional if you have facial mocaps in your game, if you're using metahumans. And then the body animations if you're using any. So these are the data driven variables, okay, that are dependent on the actual data. Then we have other 4 variables which are not so important for this tutorial, but they are conveniently made for my own game. Talking about my own game, if you do enjoy this tutorial or the previous ones, then you should check out Salvation Arts, the first game that I made all by myself. The link is in the description. It's available on Steam. And if you like this tutorial, then it gives you more of an incentive to play it out. Right, now let's move on. What all variables we have here. Okay, as you can see, these 3 booleans are again related to my own story and my own implementation of this same thing. But this particular enum right here, e_ character name, okay, it's just another normal enum. Okay, this one, as you can see, it has all of the characters and you can see it's a big list, right? It's going to repeat in another manner, but as you can see, it's a big list. So I use this enum on my struct here and simply just make it a variable character name. Then we have 3 booleans. I'll tell you why they are being used, but just see what they are for now. Okay, now let's move on. To implement this particular thing, this struct as a actual data table, we need a data table. So to make a data table, just right click and then go to miscellaneous, go here, data table. Okay, when you'll make a data table, it will ask you for a struct. In our case, it was the voiceover data. And if I click on it, it will ask me the name of the data table and the data table is ready. Let's open a data table for reference. Here we have chapter 4 segment 9. By the way, you can see there are a lot of data tables here. Okay, we have 15 here, 4 here, 6 here, 2 here, and then another 6 here and another 5 here. So there are a lot of data tables in my game, and that's how I was splitting the chapters and segments internally. Okay, I could not add every single dialogue in just one, so I split them accordingly as and when I wanted. Now let's check out the example data table. We have this one. As you can see, there are multiple characters, right? We have character names, we have the first boolean over radio, the second boolean delay needed, the third boolean pause after this VO, and these are the obvious ones. Okay, over radio is simply used to play the sound instead of 3D that is on a location. It plays it as a 2D sound that is on the screen. The delay needed, it's a simple boolean. As you can see here, it just tells the game instance that we need some sort of a delay or a gap between 2 voiceovers. And then lastly, we have this boolean pause after this voiceover. This boolean is again contextual and optional because it's my own custom implementation. I use this boolean whenever I want to pause the ongoing segment, this particular segment, as you can see, chapter 4 segment 9. If I want to pause it, I can just simply turn this on and it will be paused, but I'll have to resume it on my own. So these are the variables here. And whenever you'll make a data table, if you are new to this, by the way, whenever you'll make it, you'll have to give the row names. Okay, you can give a row name whatever you want. I can name it a row name 1 2 whatever. Okay, but I decided to give them a simple number counting. Why? Because it helps me whenever I'm making these many data tables. As you can see, there are a lot of data tables. It helps that I only have to use one variable as the counter for my row names. Okay, as you can see, a row name is just 0 from 0 to 15. So you technically need an integer, an array of integer numbers, which is 0 to 15. So it's very simple to manage. Anyways, I hope this data table aspect is clear. I mean, there's not much to explain here. You have your characters, you can just pick whatever character it is, what's his dialogue is, and what's his facial animation or dialogue audio is, the text and other variables. As you can see in this dialogue, as you can see, someone, this is an undecided or basically the undescribed character. So this is played on radio and the voice is also modified to look like a radio voice. So this thing is played 2D on the screen. That's why. Anyways, now let's move on to the next and the most important aspect, the game instance. This is the game instance. But before we dive into the game instance deeper, let me first talk about the references. So what happens is, in my player blueprint, I'm calling this function, this get player reference, and just saving the player reference. Similarly, in all of the NPCs, as you can see, all of the NPCs you see here, they simply call the game instance by using this function, and then they pass on their own self reference here using this character name enum that they have, and then it is saved. As you can see, this is the master blueprint here. As you can see, NPC master, it has character name, it's a blueprint, sorry, it's a blueprint variable. Okay, and on begin play, I'm calling this, as you can see. So on begin play, this NPC master blueprint is going to call this function. Now what happens is, self is a reference variable. Okay, so all of the child blueprints will call their own self, right? Simple as that. And they have their own different values for the names. Just like here, you can see this character is named Drew and his character name is also Drew. This character is named Rick and his character name is also Rick. Similarly, all of this character, we have Rob, his name is Rob, his character name is also Rob. So on begin play, all of the NPCs in the world that exist will be calling this function and telling the game instance to save this as a reference using their character name. Remember one thing, game instance is constantly running. Okay, when your game runs, game instance runs, right? It's not like game mode that you can change within a level or two. If you have a game instance, it is going to run every freaking time. So game instance is probably the best bet to make such a single player game. If you have a lot of dialogues and you want to toggle pause, play and resume, etc., everything, game instance is good. In my opinion, it's better than game mode if you're making a single player game. By the way, to make a game instance, you just have to search for a blueprint class and type game instance and just make your own game instance. And after you have made your game instance, which is this in our case, you have to go to the project settings, search for game instance here. As you can see, the game instance class, so this becomes the default game instance class for the whole project, for the whole game. Okay, and you can write whatever you want in this game instance. So I hope the reference aspect is clear. Every NPC is simply calling this reference. Same is with the player. Okay, we're using this get game instance, this function, and then passing on this reference. Now you might be thinking, where is this function coming from? Well, if you look closely, it says bp_int game instance. It's the interface event. Here we have the interface event. As you can see, get npc ref, like I was saying, character and the name. As you can see, same variables, npc_character, npc_character name, this. So I hope you guys do know what an interface is. It's basically a bridge that acts between various interfaces and blueprints. And if you don't know what an interface is, I highly recommend you should check out some tutorials on YouTube. There are a lot of tutorials explaining what an interface is. But you're going to need an interface for the game instance itself. So make an interface. It's very easy. Just right click, blueprint, interface. Okay, here. And after making that, just go to your game instance, class settings, and here implement it on the right side. Inherited ones, sorry, the implemented ones, and just simply implement it. Okay, that's all. So now you can access all of the functions inside the game instance. As you can see, I'm doing here. Whenever a function is made inside the game instance, it's going to have this blueprint icon thing on its top right. Okay, you don't get that on a custom function, like on any other custom function. You'll only get it on this. As you can see, it's a custom function. There is no icon, right? But for this, there is. So it's an interface event. So NPCs will call this. The game instance will save all of their respective references using their names. The same for the player, and that's it. This is the references sorted out. Now we're going to move to the actual core, the meat and potatoes of this tutorial, which is the dialogues and playing them individually. The prerequisite here is this, that you have a data table ready to go with all of the dialogue, subtitles, and everything. And what you have to do, basically make a few functions in your game instance and implement them in your interface of the game instance, and implement them in the main game instance. Okay, so I made this function, the first one to play the dialogues. It is this, the play dialogues actual. This function plays all of the dialogues depending upon what or how or which data table it is. But that's not the only thing. We need to know which data table it is, right? So what we do here, in this case, we call this function. So this is another interface event that I have called, and again, it's an interface one, so it can be called from anywhere within the code, and you can just fetch your game instance and call this function. It is event gi game instance, set chapter and segment. I had around, as you can see, not even around, I had a total of 6 chapters here, and they had multiple segments. So as you can see, chapter number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and every chapter had its own number of segments. As you can see, this has 6, this has 4, this one has 14, so on and so forth. So what happens is, whenever I call this function and I input the respective value, game instance will decide that, okay, this is the new value now, and it calls this function. So once again, this code and this tutorial may be hectic for you, but you don't have to copy it one by one. You just have to understand the gist of it. So we have one function that is being called externally, by whatever means you have externally, and it updates the chapter number and the respective segment here. After that, we do call this function, which sorts the data table required for that particular segment. Now keep in mind one thing. In my case, I did not want any sort of a hard reference here. That's why. So I decided to just simply have a soft reference here. It's a soft reference, right? No, it's a hard reference, I guess. Yeah, anyways. So what you can do is, if you want, you can simply have a soft reference of everything here. Okay. It's the sound wave, or it's the anim montage. As you can see, they are cyan color, right? So they are soft references. Whenever you have soft references, you have to cast and find the hard reference of it. And that's a step that you have to take if you want to save on the disk space, which I did, by the way. Moving on, what we do is we just simply call this function. It fetches the respective data table. As you can see, chapter 1 has 2 segments, so 2 data tables, and none is empty. Chapter 2 had 6, so 6 data tables, and the none is empty, so on and so forth. After doing that, we know which data table we need. This one, as you can see right here. Now, first function that is being called is this, that we are setting the chapter and segment. By the way, this code is only important till this part, I guess. Yeah, this is a custom event, again, just to notify all of the actors in the world that, chapter has been updated. Again, it's a custom thing. If you want to do it, you can do it, or else you don't have to do it. I did because it was necessary for my game. So this is the important stuff: updating the chapter, updating the data table, setting this boolean that current segment is completed, because of course it has been, and then just setting this struct. It's another struct I made just for backup. That's all. It's literally a backup. Now, Let's move on to actually playing the dialogues. This is the function, like I mentioned before, gi play actually the dialogue. So of course I named it conveniently. What happens is, let's take the level blueprint for example. Okay, this is our level and this is our level blueprint. So what I do is I call this get game instance. It's a universal function, and as you can see, the envelope is here, so you can it's a game instance function. So what I'm doing is I'm just setting this chapter and segment, which is chapter 4, and this is a prioritized function, right? So chapter 4, the chapter number is priority. So chapter 4, and which segment for chapter 4? 9. So it's going to set chapter 4, segment 9 as the default one, this one, and then simply play dialogues actual. It's going to start playing them. Now let's look at the actual code of playing them. We have this data table here. Okay, we are already setting the data table, right? It's a hard reference for the data table. We're directly setting it, and we are calling this function get data table row. Now what row do we want? Well, we want the row using this array, row names array. Now, if you remember earlier in the video, I was mentioning that I've named the row names as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, right? The whole integer counting. This is the reason I'm doing that. Now, if any of the data table has more rows than this, which is a maximum of 45, by the way, if there are more rows, I could just simply add another row here and index here, and the row 46 can now be used anywhere I want. So what happens is, we take this array, we get the element on this index, which is the current array index. This determines the row number in essence. If it is row number 5, then dialog number 5, or row number 7, then dialog number 7, etc. So this is what happens. By default, it is 0. 0 means the first dialog. I hope it is all making sense to you guys. 0 means the first dialog. So by default, the index is 0. We get the first dialog, which is again 0. And then we fetch that row. And if it is true, if it is row found, we set this boolean. Again, this is a testing or in a private customized boolean, but again, I'll explain it. It's just telling me that every voiceover from the previous one has been played. Okay. And after that, what we do is we do this function right here. We are fetching this struct, which is again s underscore voiceover data, this struct. Okay. We are fetching this struct because that is the data table. You know, the core of the data table is that struct. It is based on this struct. So we are taking this struct, we are breaking it here. Again, you can see soft object references. It's in cyan color, soft object references. We're using this macro. It takes all of the the data variables we have, and it's simply just async load asset, and once again, async load asset. So it loads the asset in an async manner, and then after loading, it fetches the loaded segment. So if you implement it this way by using the soft references, you might see that there is a delay in loading if your data table is huge in size. Anyways, so after loading, it sends the actual value, and then we check this boolean over radio. Where was this? Here. As you can see, character name, over radio, delay needed, voiceover is the exact same booleans that we had here, or that we had here, right? So first boolean is over radio. If it is, then just simply this function is simply playing a 2D sound on the player itself, so you can replace it with play sound 2D if you want. If it is not on radio, then we simply call this important, very important function. Okay, first I'm explaining the flow, then I'll explain the details. We call this very important function that plays the voiceover on every character, and then we create a subtitle widget using the player controller. I'm not gonna go in details. Okay, you can make a user interface widget. There are multiple tutorials making the user interface code and everything, so just Google search or YouTube search a user interface widget for Unreal Engine 5 and you're good to go. After that, I'm taking this whole duration of the dialogue. As you can see, the audio dialogue, I'm taking its duration because the subtitle needs to stay on the screen for that much duration, and then after that much delay, that particular voiceover is played. If it is successfully played, then we'll check, do we need a delay? As you can see, we had this variable delay needed. Do we need a delay? If we do, then we'll just simply wait for that much delay. Again, I'm using a function to calculate the amount of delay required for every dialogue, and we'll just simply wait for that much and continue. We'll increment the index, as you can see, index +1, and then do the same, rinse and repeat. There we go. So this is the loop, right? Let's say if we don't want a delay, then we'll check if the game should be paused or not. If it is, then we'll see if it is already paused. If it is not, then we'll pause it, right? And after that, we'll do some other customized code, and simply that's it. We just increase this pause index. So we have 3 indexes basically. One is this delay index, how many times we have delayed in one segment. Pause index, how many times we have paused in one segment. And current array index, the current row of the data table. Now in this chapter, segment, as you can see, there is no pause and there is just one delay. I can pause here, but I'll have to resume manually. So I'm not going to do that, but you can pause, but you have to resume. Now to resume, what I did was I made this function gi resume vo after pause. Okay. You can call this function. It will see if it was really paused. It will switch the array index to the next one, because let's say you were paused on this dialog. Okay. So that means you're on dialog number 8, which is row 7. So if you want to resume, you have to start from row 8. Okay. So you have to increment that number to go to row 8 and then resume. So this is the thing. I'm not gonna save it. So this is the thing. So if you are on row 7, now you're on row 8. You play this function, resume after pause, and that's it. Now what does this function do? Click on it, custom function. It just resets this boolean and then starts the whole same thing, whole same cycle once again. You fetch the data table, you fetch the row using the index, and then you see, and then you play the dialogues, and that's pretty much it. Now lastly, I'm going to discuss this function, playing voiceover. If you guys remember from the previous function, this function, we have references for all of the characters, right? All of these characters that exist. So what this function does is it fetches the character name. It fetches if it is on radio, the audio itself, the face anim, the body anim, etc. And then it checks if that character is Jack, which is our player. If it is our player, then we play the voiceover on Jack, which is again a 2D sound actor, basically a simple play sound 2D. If it is someone, which is again a non-descriptive character, again we do the same thing, play sound 2D, which is here, as you can see, play sound 2D. This play sound 2D is inside the player, so just to have one single function being called every time, not to have disparities. And then lastly, if it is neither the player nor this someone character, then we simply play this. Okay, what we do is we call this function on the NPC, play voiceover from DT, and then play anims only, because we have this and this. Now this handles the dialogue, the actual dialogue audio, and then if it is on radio or not. If it is on radio, then it becomes play sound 2D. If it is not on radio, then it's a natural sound from a sound component inside the character, which I'll show you guys in a minute. And the second function for playing just the animations, okay, the face animations or the body animations, which you'll see now. And all of the NPC references are hooked up here. And again, there's a select node that's running on all of this. So let's say the character is Drew. What happens is it will fetch and it will see that, okay, the character is not player and it's not someone, it is Drew. So Drew's reference here, Drew, is passed on here. This function is called on Drew because that's how this function happens. Okay, it's an interface function. It is called on the subject, the target. So that in our case becomes Drew. So this function is called on Drew, so as this one. And the other one is for just a custom function. So let's look at this function in the last segment of this tutorial. We have this play voiceover from data table. Sorry, this one, as you can see, play voiceover from DT. To play this on any of your character, you're gonna need your own character, for example this, and you're gonna need an audio component, right? You can customize it, have your own volume, attenuation, etc. And then just simply call this function as set sound. So you are setting the sound for the audio component and then just play it, and that's pretty much it. So that is what you're doing here. Okay, in essence, you're just simply calling that function here and setting the sound and then playing it. Done. And if it is a radio sound, which is a redundant thing here, because if you guys were looking carefully here, I already had a code for radio sound. Where is it? Yeah, as you can see, if it is over radio, I'm already playing it as a 2D sound. So it was a redundant thing. I recently updated the code, but before that, this 2D sound was played on the character itself, but it was causing some issues. So I decided to keep it separate. So this function will only play sounds which are connected to the NPC. Now, I've finished this tutorial in 25 minutes. Now let's look at the results of this tutorial. I'm going to run this segment here by using this testing code here. So if I press play, there will be some delay because the data table hasn't been loaded yet from soft references, but you'll get the point.
Guys, it's getting late. We must leave.
Man, this is bullshit. We're just standing here doing nothing. Absolutely nothing. We can't let any of them die. I can't.
Chief, it's been a while. What's the plan now?
Still trying to get through to the 15 Feb commander. They can handle it.
Chief, we're seeing smoke. The villa is burning. Do you copy?
What?
That's not looking good.
We need to go. You will stand down.
Chief, it's literally on fire. What else are we waiting for?
So I guess that gives you enough of an idea on how to make this system, the dialogue system for custom NPCs. If you are interested in making meta humans as your character, NPC characters in your own game, then check out the previous tutorial I uploaded before this. I will try to link it at the end of this tutorial as well. And that's pretty much it. I hope it was good enough and concise enough for you by condensing every information that we have. But just to summarize, you have a game instance that runs the code on every NPC, and you have its own interface that is calling all of the functions. We have a struct, and then we have a respective data table using that struct, and that's pretty much it. So if you guys have any queries or questions, just do let me know in the comment section, and that's pretty much it, guys. So yeah, see you in the next one. Till then, take care and goodbye.